Hello, and welcome to this video, which is called an Introduction to Capital Strategy Management. What we're going to do is we're going to learn about the value of designing a capital strategy properly, and then we're going to focus really hard on making sure that we avoid key mistakes that oftentimes happen when you're raising money or managing money. We're going to talk about how do you do it right versus wrong. We're going to talk about some core capital strategy concepts that's critical for you to understand. And then we're going to talk about how do you match your owner and your business considerations with your capital strategy. And finally, we'll talk about making sure that you understand whether or not you have a cash flow problem or do you actually have a profitability problem, because the solutions for them are different. Okay. If you do capitalization correctly, it allows you things such as the ability to launch products as quickly as you would have the capabilities to. It allows you to, I cross out never, but rarely run out of stock, especially during peak season. And it allows you to expand to new channels as quickly as you want. And it allows you to spend more of your time focusing on growth because you're not having to waste time focusing on managing your cash on a day-by-day basis. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Okay. It's only going to be true if you do your capital strategy right. Can't emphasize that enough. Because capital strategy done wrong does things like this. Puts you at risk for personal bankruptcy. Many times people will take SBA loans, lines of credit, bank loans, credit cards. They won't understand that they're all interacting together, and they'll have created a situation where they have a large amount of personal guarantees that if something happens in the business, they could come after money that's in their bank account or other types of things, even such as homes and other assets. It also, capital strategy done wrong, risks having months and years of success get thrown down the drain by one major bad decision. If you do a lot of things right for 2 years and then you expand and invest $1 million into something that goes wrong, you could have wiped out years of hard work. It also risks turning what I call your me account into a two-way street. For those of you that haven't heard me speak on that before, the me account to me is the bank account that represents you as an individual person, not your particular business. And the reason I call it that way is the goal is to, of any business, should be for you as an owner, is to not have all your money tied up in the business, but eventually turn some of it over to your me account. If you do your capital strategy wrong, however, and you're not properly capitalized, you'll find yourself in the endless game of moving money into your me account and then only to have to move it right back out again because the business needs it. And a critical thing that happens oftentimes among e-commerce sellers is that a capital strategy done wrong can fool you into thinking that things are going well. You get that money from Amazon on an Amazon lending and you say, wow, I've got a lot of cash coming in. I got a lot of cash in my bank account. And then all of a sudden, as you start to have to repay it back, things can turn on you quite quickly. So the bottom line is that having more capital, as I like to say, the only thing it does is it speeds up the car. So make sure that it's on a paved road toward your goals and not heading toward, as my mentor used to say, the cliffs of Dover. Let's talk about some key capital strategy concepts that you need to have in place. The first one is that capital strategy is a core CEO activity. Up until the time that you hire a CFO, which most of you never will do, you are effectively the CFO of your business, and you need to think about capital strategy as something that's critical, where you need to delegate other low priority items, but you don't want to delegate this one. Second, recognize that capital strategy is an ongoing process, just like optimization of listings or any other thing that you do in your business. Too often I see people that get in a one-time cash crunch, they try and raise cash, and they don't think about capital strategy as an ongoing process. The reason for that is once you deploy capital in order to grow faster, what's going to happen is that cash needs more cash, because as you get larger, you'll need more capital, and with increased growth comes a greater need for working capital expansion. And then finally, you need to match your capital strategy with who you are as an owner. As I always like to say, money comes with personalities, and you need to match your personality with the personality of your capital strategy partners. Now, I hesitate to say this because on one level, everybody needs cash in their business, but I'm actually a firm believer that if you don't have the right processes in place, it's better to not take any capital at all and grow slower than it is to do it wrong. So I've modified this to say don't apply scale capital, meaning larger dollar amounts than initial startup, until you have the financial processes in place or you're putting yourself and the business at risk. And recognize that there's a process to knowing what you need. It's called the networking capital and capital expansion process with then an acceptable cushion. You want to design and manage what we'll be talking about later called a capital stack, which matches the sources of your capital to the type of risk that you have by use of funds. And I don't know if I could say it any stronger. Always raise capital before you need it. You need to use the fact that you can use lines of credit to manage interest costs and all other types of things, but it's never a good idea to try for financing when, as I like to say, you're up against the hot pipes and you need it. So what's the difference between capital strategy and just needing cash? A capital strategy is a sophisticated ongoing process where needing cash is reactionary. You only try and go grab it when you need it. A capital strategy has discipline to match the risk with the finance type, whereas needing cash just grabs cash wherever you can find it. Capital strategy takes what you need, and then most importantly, you only use it when it's needed, as needing cash takes whatever they're giving you and you tend to blow it all. And finally, capital strategy relies on accurate forecasts of growth that continually get more accurate and applying a use of funds against those forecasts, where needing cash doesn't even have a forecast and just buys and spends based on guesswork. When you're thinking about your capital strategy, start first not with what the business needs, but who are you as an owner? How aggressive or conservative are you? The reason this is important is because if you design an aggressive capital strategy, but by nature you're conservative, then you're going to constantly be in struggle and make bad decisions because you're going to be playing with what I call scared money. The second thing is you have to take a look at is where is the bulk of your assets today? If the bulk of your net assets are in your business, that's a different scenario than if maybe you've already exited and you have a diversified asset portfolio. If you're conservative by nature and the bulk of your net worth is in your business today, it's not a bad idea to play it safe and only use a littler amount of capital for the most important activities that are already proven out. If, on the other hand, you're conservative by nature, but you already have exited or you have millions of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, watch out that you're not playing it too safe and missing out on opportunity to really expand the business with very little risk. This one gets me nervous, is if the bulk of your net worth is in your business and you don't have a lot of diversified assets outside of it and you're too aggressive, be careful because you're essentially betting the farm on your one business venture. And if you're aggressive and your asset diversified, you are more able to stretch and go up to higher levels of capitalization. So I encourage everybody to think of this, and even if you have to circle one of these and write it down and say, I'm aggressive by nature, but I'm diversified, I'm going to focus on a capital strategy that is able to grow and stretch. That's different than if you're in one of the other quadrants. The next thing you need to do is you need to match your capital strategy, not just to who you are as an owner, but who you are as the leader of your business. I like to call you the CEO of your business, even though it might be a solopreneur or small business, because those are all the functions that need to get done. But as a CEO, do you typically more like a CMO, which is a person on the gas? Are you kind of in the middle like a COO? Or do you naturally run your business with a foot on the brakes because you're very conservative? In my experience with e-commerce sellers, they tend to be more CMO than CFO. And your capital strategy must know who you are to design correctly because, for example, if I'm putting together a forecast and I'm a CMO type leader, I tend to be over optimistic on my forecast, so I better make sure that for my capital strategy, I've accounted for that variable. The other thing you want to be thinking about is how much of my own money am I willing to put in, and how much, even if I don't have to put it in, am I willing to personally guarantee? How much am I willing to live with on a business guarantee, and how much of it do I want to be truly non-guaranteed money? This is critical because the fact of the matter is that you don't want to put so much risk into your business. You want to think about a step-by-step process of determining your capital needs by those types of categories. The first thing is, we're going to cover that in this video, is do you have a cash flow problem or do you have actually a profitability problem? After you understand that, you can then start to focus on how much capital do you need to fund your growth and for what purpose. And then finally, how do you monitor your cash needs over time to transform from a one-time cash raise to somebody who's managing on a multi-tiered capital strategy basis over time? Here's the way that you go through to understand if you have a profitability or a cash flow problem. Step one, take a look at your P&L, make sure that it's accrual, and reconfirm that all of your numbers are accurate. Before you go taking on debt, it's even more critical than normal to make sure that you have accurate accounting in place. Then take a look at your overall contribution margin for your business. Ensure that your contribution margin is not only an acceptable level, but it's also been stable over some period of time. Generally, we recommend contribution margins in excess of 25%. Take a look at your overhead and make sure that your overhead is either stable or if it is increasing, you know why. Understand that this P&L view is a historical view and you need to factor out maybe one-time either positive or negative impacts. And then finally, make sure that you have a forecast to go with your historical so that you can understand what the future profitability is of the business. Once you know that, you want to focus on your product profitability, which is both a margin percentage, which is a P&L perspective, but also looking at what is your return on cost of goods sold, because that's a measure of cash flow efficiency. So as you can see here in this little red box, we've got a product in the middle of the thing, and it's got a 34% contribution margin, which I think most of you would say is, hey, that's really great. But if you look, it only has a ratio of 1 to 1.1 in terms of how much profit it takes, or how much cash it takes in order to generate $1 of profit. What this is saying, this metric is saying for every $1 of capital that you deploy, you will get $1.10 more back on that particular capital. Not that you're getting 10% more, you're getting the $1.10 or 1.1 factor. So if you notice here right next to it, you put $5.33 into something on a landed cost basis and to make a $5.89 profit. The key point on that is, if you notice in some of this graphing and color coding that we do in the workbook, is that we want to make sure that you're understanding that there are certain products that might have good profitability but poor cash flow, and vice versa. Once you've done that, and if you notice that you have a profitability problem, you want to sort it into what's the category of the problem, and then how do I either detect it and then ultimately do something about it. If I have a COGS problem, meaning product cost specifically, it might be coming from the fact that I'm buying things that are more than 25% of my revenue, or it might be due to price pressures that are short term. Both of them have different solutions. You other might find in the marketing area is that you're buying either revenue or rank, and your marketing costs have gotten too high. In the Amazon problem, you might have things that are pretty large for the price point and creating a fulfillment problem. And if you recognize all of those things in combination with each other, you might have a little bit, sort of what, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. You've got a little problem over here, a little problem over there, and the next thing you know, you've got an unprofitable product problem. And then finally, if you have good product profitability, you still can have a profit problem if your overhead has gotten to be too big of a percentage of revenue. The key point to recognize is that if you have a profitability problem, applying more cash to it, unless you change some of those profitability variables, won't help you, and it can actually be somewhat dangerous. The final principle that I'll mention here is, in more than 30 years of being an entrepreneur, I've learned what I call one absolute truth regarding cash flow. And that is, you will never get the best deal raising capital when you actually need capital. Most of the time when you need money, nobody will even offer it to you. And the reason is if you need money, that's often a sign that you're not profitable and they invest in profitable businesses. Therefore, the way you need to think about things is that the best time to raise capital is actually when you don't need it, not when you do. Okay, so in this video, we've shown the difference between good and bad capital strategy and how a good capital strategy can help you grow your business faster by accelerating new products and launches, and also help you spend less time worrying about cash flow day to day and be able to focus more on growth. Thank you.